I'm really excited about today's project. If you haven't seen my spooky season sew along that I did, you can check out that quilt over here. But I wanted a little wall hanging that would match it, so that's what we'll be making today. Okay, so I love the spooky season quilt. It has been so much fun to make, and I'm just so glad that I have a Halloween quilt that is my very own now. And I needed a little wall hanging to go with it so that I can deck out my house in time for the holidays. And so I designed this cute little happy haunting wall hanging that features this adorable little haunted house that's from the quilt. So let me walk you through how to make it. It's a great scrap buster project, so if you have some scraps lying around, this might be the perfect Halloween project for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to be using some leftover 10-inch squares that I have from this Too Cute to Spook collection by me and my sister for Moda. It's just adorable. I made a quilt using this for one of our videos, and so I had some leftovers lying around, and so it truly is my stash in this case, but it's a wonderful line if you don't have Halloween fabric. You're also going to need, of course, a little outer border, and I use these adorable spider webs, really cute, and I use this cute plaid on the back. So that's what I've got going on, and you'll need some background fabric as well, and I just used white. So from your 10-inch squares, you're going to need 2 matching dark squares to be your haunted house. This is like the walls of your house. You're also going to need 1 square that's going to be your roof and 1 square that's going to be the doors and windows. And I decided to use these cute pumpkins so that they can be peeking through the doors and windows this time. And so that is what I have here. So let's go ahead and walk through the cutting. If you grab the pattern for this, there is awesome cutting diagrams that breaks it down square by square. So let's go ahead and start with our door and windows. So I am going to line this up, and I actually need to grab a slightly bigger ruler. So let me do that. And we are going to measure over 4.5 inches. Just make sure I've got it all straight. There we go, and that we can set aside. So like I said, if you have scraps, you really only need this 4.5-inch piece. And then we are going to, oh, you know what? I have to fix this. Usually this would be fine, but because these little pumpkins are directional, I forgot I have to turn it to cut my door and my windows. My windows will be fine, but I'm actually going to now cut my door out of this piece. Usually you would just cut a 3-inch strip off of here, but then all my little pumpkins would be sideways, so we don't want that. So I'm going to make another cut, which it's okay when we have scraps in our stash, right? So I'm going to measure over 4.5 this way so that my pumpkins will be upright. If I had just turned my 10-inch square, this wouldn't have even been a thing. And then I need it to measure 4.5 by 3 for the door. So let's just cut that. So there is the door. And then from this one I can go back, or actually even from this one since I've cut it now, but I just need a 2 by 2.5 inch rectangle and then a 3 by 1.5 inch rectangle. So I'm going to cut a 1.5 inch this way. Make sure I've got it all lined up. There we go. And we need this to measure 3 inches. And I want to keep this cute little pumpkin face. So I'm going to cut this side. There we go. So it can be peeking out. And then I need a 2 by 2.5. And so let's see. I think I'll use this one right here. That'll be cute. Perfect. So there are my 3 pieces out of that. So let's grab this 10-inch square, and this is what I'm going to use to make my rooftops. And this one is pretty easy because I just need to trim off 1 inch so that this is trimmed down to 9 inches on one side. Oops, here we go. And then I'm going to turn this, and then we're going to measure over 5 inches. So we have one 5 by 9 inch rectangle. There's that one. And then we need to cut a 2.5 inch strip. Like so. That is our extra. And then we're going to cut this in half so it measures 2.5 by 4.5. And we're going to need 2 of those. So there are my rooftops. And then let's cut the walls of our house. So you're going to cut each of these 10-inch squares. Remember, they're matching, but they are cut differently. So for the first one, we are going to cut a 5-inch strip. So I'm going to measure over 5 inches. There we go. And then I'm going to turn this and measure over 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5. There's one piece. And then I am going to cut a 1.5 inch strip here. And I'm going to trim this one to 4.5, so 1.5 by 4.5. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. I try and keep all of my pieces on one side and my extra pieces on another, just to keep myself straight. And then we need a 2.5 by 4.5. So I love that my ruler is exactly 2.5 inches wide. And then I can come down to the 4.5 inch mark, and I can cut and cut. All right, so there's part of my walls. And then from our other strip, or square, I should say, let's cut that one as well. And we need to cut a 3.5 inch strip. Measure over 3.5 and cut, and then I need to trim off 1 inch so that it measures 3.5 by 9. So there's that, and that is a keep piece. And then I'm going to turn this because I need to cut, this should measure 6.5 inches now, this way, and so I need to measure over 3.5 inches. 1, 2, 3.5. I always double check. And we're going to make 2 cuts that measure 3.5 by 6.5. 1, 2, 3.5. There we go. And just a couple more little pieces here. I'm going to turn this again. And we need a 2.5 by 3. And so this is 2.5 wide, and I have 3 inches left. So there's my 2.5 by 3. And then I need 2 1.5 by 2 inches. So since I know this is 3 inches wide, I'm going to cut a 2-inch strip this direction. And then I can turn this and cut it in half so that I have 2 that measure 1.5 by 2. There we go. So there is all of our cutting. Now we have all of our pieces ready to go. I'm going to move my extras out of the way so that they don't confuse me. You're also going to need some background pieces, so let me show you what I have here. And this is just obviously to make the one haunted house block. So you're going to need 4 2.5-inch squares. You're going to need 2 5-inch squares. And you're also going to need a 4.5 by 4-inch rectangle and a 4.5 by 8.5-inch rectangle. So those are all of our background pieces. So now let's go ahead and start making our house. So we're going to begin by taking our roof pieces. So those are our 2.5 by 4.5-inch rectangles that we have here, and then our larger 5 by 9. And our 2.5-inch squares and 5-inch squares are going to be used to make the rooftops. So let's go ahead and bring these over. These are all going to be made in essentially the same way. We're just going to be adding our squares to the corners and snowballing them. So let me show you. You can draw a line corner to corner, and we're going to sew right on that line, just like so. You can also, if you don't want to take the time to mark, you can press a line. So I'll just fold my 5-inch square corner to corner and press that in half. And then I can just sew right on that press line. Either way works. It's really just your preference. So let's go ahead now, and I am going to lay this so that one of my lines is pointing towards the middle of my rectangle, and we are going to sew right on that line. There we go. And now we can trim that off and just leave our 1/4-inch seam allowance and press that back. There we go. And then we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. This is the one I pressed, and so I want to make sure that that line that I either drew or pressed is going to intersect with the one that I just stitched. So we know that that's going to work out just perfect. And again, we're going to sew right on that line. All right, so again, we can just trim that off, leaving our 1/4-inch seam allowance. And we can press that back. So there is our big rooftop. That is done. And so we're going to do that exact same process here really quickly to do the small rooftops. And so that is just using our smaller rectangles and our 2.5-inch squares. And so I am just going to whip through those really quick. And I will meet you back here when it's done. All right. So we have all 3 of our little rooftops made. Our 2 small and our 1 large rooftops. So now let's go ahead and start assembling the walls of our house. So I'm going to set these aside and move some of my scraps out of the way. And let's bring all of our pieces so we can start putting this together. So let's start with the large section of our house, which is right here. So we know the big window goes in there. And this little rectangle goes below it. And then we should have 2 strips that will go on either side and 1 large strip that's going to go across the top. And so I'm going to begin by sewing this little rectangle to my window. I love that these little pumpkins are going to be peeking out. It's so cute. Just line up my fabric there. Go. And we can press that one back. And then we can add these 2 strips to both sides of that, making sure the black rectangle is on the bottom. Obviously you can flip it around, but if you have a directional print, you want to be aware of that. Okay. Sew that down with a 1/4-inch seam. that around. I'm just going to finger press for now, and then add this one to the other side. Make sure it's all lined up. There we go. Awesome. Okay, let's give that a press. Make sure we don't have any tucks or anything. Looks good. And now we can add this larger strip to the top. All right, let's give that a press. There we go, that looks great. And now on this one, we can go ahead and add the large rooftop. So I'm just gonna match that up along the top. There we go. Now we can just press that and this section of the house is done. So I'll just roll that back. There we go. Now our first section of our haunted house is done. Essentially this is 3 little houses all together that we're putting together to create our haunted castle. And so let's move on to this little one right here. So I'll set this aside for a minute and let me show you how we're gonna make that. So let's grab our 3 by 2 inch pieces. I have those here. And then we are going to take our 1.5 by 3 inch piece and we are going to sew those together. And then we're going to sew this strip to the top. So much the same way that we did the bigger house, just smaller pieces here. So let's go ahead and sew these together. I'm just going to bring them all to my machine so I can just piece one after the other. Go ahead and roll that back and add this one to the other side. There we go. Then we'll add this strip to the top. Press that one back. And we can grab our little rooftop. So you can see that fits together perfectly. I'm just going to go ahead and sew that down. There we go. And the last piece we want to add to this is our background rectangle. So that's this one, and it measures 4.5 by, I believe it was 8.5. Yes. Wanted to make sure I tell you right. We'll add that there. And we'll press this whole section. There we go. And now that's going to match up just right with our first little section that we made. So let's go ahead and undo this last tower, as I like to call it. So our large piece goes on the bottom. And remember, all of these are 4.5 inches wide, these last 2 sections that we're working with. And so if you're looking at it and you have the 5-inch piece side to side, you're going to want to rotate that so that it will match up with the rest of your pieces. And so we have that turned, and then we have our 2 little pieces, and they go with the tall sides, the taller sides, up and down. And then we have our little pumpkins. Oh no, see, this one's turned the other way. I cut it wrong. I have to fix it because we've got these cute little pumpkin faces. Let me grab another piece. These are the things that sometimes when you have directional fabric you don't think of. So this measures 2 by 2.5. So we are just gonna fix it with this little guy right here. And I want to center him up in there so that he is just going to be peeking out. Sometimes on projects like this, it's worth it to take that extra time and make sure you have what you want. So there we go. Oops, this needs to come down. So it's 2 inches tall. There we go. And then just trim off this little bit. There we go. Much better. Crisis averted. There he is. 2 by 2.5 inches. And then our last rectangle is going to go there across the top. So let's go ahead and sew these together, and then we'll add these pieces to the top and the bottom. If you didn't have directional fabric, you wouldn't have to worry about any of that at all. And honestly, maybe you don't have to worry about it anyway, but I feel like when there's a little face that you can have peek out of the window, you just really want to use it. There we go. That's sewn together, so we can press that. All right, and then this goes to the top. Go ahead and press that one back and add this rectangle to the bottom now. Just make sure it stays lined up. All right. There we go. So now we just need to add the roof and our last little background piece. So let's add our rooftop. And I'm just gonna finger press this back to add our last little 4.5 by 4 inch piece here. All right, and let's give this a good press so everything is laying nice and flat. And then we can sew together our 3 sections of our haunted house. So let's go ahead and put these 2 together first, but I want to take a minute really quick before I do that. In my Spooky Season Sew Along Facebook group, one of the ladies that was making the quilt, she actually made all of her houses different. So there's a few houses in the quilt, as you can see, and mine are all made exactly the same. They're like this, and then on one of them we just swap it so the castle's on the other side. But it's always tower, little house, big part of the house. The orientation is essentially the same. And she made hers all different, which I thought was so fun. She made a few like this. So just play with it. Maybe your house looks different than mine, and that is totally fine. But we're just gonna stick with the original design this time. So I'm gonna sew these 2 together. With a 1/4 inch seam. There we go. And I can kind of fold that back and add it to this large section here. And sew those together as well. All right, let's give this a press. Make that seam go the way that I want it to. There we go. It doesn't really matter, but when I have this high contrast black fabric with the white background, I really do try and roll my seams to that dark side so that they're hidden. There we go. Look how cute that is. Isn't that fun? But wait, we're missing a little bit of the fun and whimsy. We need to add our chimney and our smoke, and we even have some cute little bats that are fluttering around. So let me show you how we did that. In the pattern, there is a page that has all of your traceables on them. And so I went ahead and I traced those onto our Missouri Star Lightweight Fusible. I keep that in this little container. I love it. And so you can see I've got all of those pieces. And then I went ahead and I just cut them out and ironed them on to whatever fabric I decided I wanted to use for those different pieces. So I've done that here. Let me go ahead and cut this out to show you. These are our bats. You have 3 bats, 1 chimney, and 1 smoke per house. And I just traced this onto the fusible. If you're not familiar with this and haven't done the iron-on applique before, it is really easy to see through and to trace. And so that is all I did. If you have any trouble, you can always hold it up to a window. Whatever works for you. And we're just going to go around this with our scissors. I'll get some of that bulk out of the way. These little bats are kind of tedious to cut, but they sure are cute once it's all put together. There we go. Just a few more curves here. There he is, adorable. Okay, so like I said, I have 3 bats, here they are, 1 chimney, and 1 little puff of smoke. And so the bats actually go on very last, but we can add our chimney and our smoke to our block. And so let's just take this over to the ironing board and I'll show you how we do it. They're all attached the exact same way, and you can kind of decide if there's a certain place where you want your chimney to be, because this is your house, you can make it your own. So let's just peel off this paper backing, and if you kind of crease it, it allows it to kind of pop loose. If I can get my finger under there. There we go. And then we will just set that on there. And I like to overlap the roof so it gives it a little bit of dimension. Before you press it down though, you want to add your smoke, because I tuck that behind the chimney. And so that's just going to be coming out of my chimney just like so. Isn't that cute? So we'll go ahead and press that. And you really truly want to press. You don't want to iron, because you don't want to take the risk of lifting that up and getting that adhesive on your iron. So there we go. We have added our little smoke and chimney, which just gives it a little bit more dimension. And so from here you can go ahead and blanket stitch or do a satin stitch or a little zigzag to finish that off. If you don't mind the raw edges, you could totally just do a straight stitch. So to finish off my little wall hanging, I went ahead and added a 2.5-inch inner border all the way around, and then a 3-inch outer border to the outside of that. And then I actually have my bats going from the background out into the border, just so it gives you even more dimension. And those are added the exact same way that I just added the chimney and the smoke. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project. It's super fun and super quick, and if you still want to buy a kit for my spooky season sew along, you can do that. The videos will be available for a long time, so you can make both the quilt and this adorable wall hanging. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, it's Misty. Thanks for watching at home. If you aren't already a part of our Missouri Star family, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want a notification every time we release a new video. I'll see you next Monday on the newest episode of At Home.